to stick up and, kind of put their heads out there and say, look, we've seen it, we've known it. I think I've asked you this before, Dr. Dodds. Have you ever witnessed veterinary malpractice?
Yes.
Yes. Every vet I've asked has said that, and some have said several. They've seen it several times. So we know it exists. And that's why Dr. Dodds is here, because she helps go through some of the files to read to see if there's something that looks amiss. Because Dr. Dodds and I both know, because she's a veterinarian, I was a vet tech for many years. We've worked in the industry forever. And we've seen people get very upset and think that the vet did something to their animal, and that happens probably more times than veterinary malpractice. And so we need the vets to be able to look at it, and that's why Dr. Dodds is here. So I always say that I'm a good person to run this show kind of thing, is because I have been accused of actually killing an animal before, which people are amazed that I admit that, but I think it's a strong thing to talk about, because it really was not my fault. It was an elderly dog who passed away from pre-existing conditions that he had. But it's very hurtful, right, Dr. Dodds, when someone, especially
Absolutely.
Oh my God, it would be like accusing a mother, I think, of child molestation, who would, that's how it felt. It still feels that way to me to have that, and it's actually on my Yelp account, and so people can read that if they'd like. They can read my response to it if you want. But I don't want to be a part of an organization that just wants to attack veterinarians, because I have worked for so many veterinarians, and the majority of them have been great veterinarians. But there is this little pocket over here that is why Dr. Dodds is here, right? We know there's this little pocket, but the impact that little pocket makes is sad, and sometimes results in the death of animals unnecessarily, and that's why we're speaking out. So Scott Fine started this organization because, unfortunately, he lost a pet to veterinary malpractice, and then he brought on board Jerry Robb, who wrote the book that you can get on Amazon. It also helps pay for the documentary. The book is called Joey's Legacy: Seeking Truth and Integrity in Veterinary Malpractice. So this is a book you can get. Jerry, hi, how are you? Can you hear me?
How are you? I can. Can you hear me?
Can you? Yeah, I can hear you. So I was just introducing you. Tell us a little bit about what went on when you started writing the book. Had you ever heard about veterinary malpractice before you wrote the book?
I had not, and I'm on my 6th grade day, and I've been going to veterinarian. I've never met one that I didn't think was fantastic, especially the one I've had for 35 years. But Scott talked me into it. I really wasn't even interested in it immediately, because I was writing another book, but I put it on the shelf. Love animals. Scott has a that you just don't, a courteous passion that you just don't see much. I really thought it would be a 150-page book. I just couldn't imagine there were all these stories out here, but all of a sudden we have 600 pages, so I'm working on volume 2 right now, which this month. Excuse me, in July.
Volume 2. How many stories were in the first book?
40.
40 stories. And correct me if I'm wrong, what I understood is that each one of these stories was actually not just stories that people wrote, but they had actually been proven to be veterinary malpractice, correct?
Well, that's what I'm told. Everyone sign a release that they had documentation and proof of the story that they're telling, mainly for liability purposes.
Right.
But some of them are pretty amazing stories. I had no idea there'd be so many. I've got about 30 or 35 in volume 2. And I have one story coming in from Australia about a horse.
Oh my gosh. Dr. Dodds, I know that you we're waiting. I think there's a little bit of technical difficulties going on the back end with Scott. Scott, you're not there, right? We don't see you. I just want to confirm. Can you hear us?
I'm here. Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, you can. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I couldn't see you, so I wasn't sure if you were there. So I'll just introduce Scott a little bit. I know you can't really see him. Hopefully you guys can hear him. None of us would be here if it wasn't for Scott's love of his dog Joey, who passed away. Scott, I know, we kind of always talk a little bit about this, but tell us a little bit about Joey.
Well, Joey came to us at about 8 weeks old, and we're the only family he knew, and he just grew up in a world of love and compassion, and he always gave it right back to us. We obviously when he died, it hit us like a ton of bricks, and when I realized that it probably didn't have to happen had he been, had and determined that he had a kidney renal dysfunction. And well, anyway, we lost him 2 days after that visit, and we wanted to create a place where others whose family members met the same fate could come for some comfort and solace, and just kind of a shoulder to cry on. And I think we had like 200 people join us, and we're up to that was in October of 2020 members now. But that about 80% of the people tell us that they've never had a bad experience, which of course we're very kind of confirms what I've always thought my whole life. I'm sure Jerry will tell you the same thing. Our focus is a very small subset of the overall veterinarians in small animal practice, which I believe the last count was over 70,000 in the United States. It really is a small number. However, when a family member, it's devastating. And I've always believed that when it happens at the hands of another, it adds an additional layer of grief and devastation. You learn to live with it, but it's not easy after 4 years. And I know there are people out there 6, 8, 10 years and more that'll tell you the same thing. So we try to do the best we can for them, and we'll keep going.
So, Dr. Dodds, do you think that well, I guess let me back up a little bit. How does it work? Like if a veterinarian is involved in veterinary malpractice and a client wants to do something, what would be the process that a vet would go through? It goes in front of the board, I assume.
Well, yeah, but the first thing is one has to determine what the records show to document what happened, because you can't assume that the veterinarian had malpractice. You can ask about it. You can allege there was malpractice. You can write a summary of everything that happened with the pet guardian can do that, all of the records and everything, and send it to the appropriate state board wherever they live. And then the state board will do an investigation if they think there's merit and find out from the veterinarian what their side of the story is. And then that has to be resolved. And sometimes we can't resolve it because it's hearsay on one hand. They called me, they said this, and there's no record of it either in the veterinarian's record or in the pet owner's phone call record. You can't prove it. And as we talked about on Sunday when we discussed this, sometimes you just have to go online and tell the story because no way to actually prove it. And so we have many questions all the time because I've been a veterinarian for so many years. People ask me, well, do you think this is malpractice or is it a negligence or what is it? And sometimes with the grief involved, which is very palpable, we have to tell the reality is, unfortunately, it's a difference of opinion. And if you can document what happened, then somebody independently has to look at that. And the question is, will veterinarians want to talk about other veterinarians in a negative sense? And that's very difficult. That's a peer pressure issue.
Yeah.
That doesn't affect me at all. I look at the thing objectively and I say, it doesn't matter who the person is this correct or isn't it correct? And
right.
I can do that because I've been a veterinarian for so many years, and I probably have more experience than many of the, much more than the younger people that come on board today. And things have changed. I mean, the veterinary specialties, veterinary principles are different in the sense of the fact that specialists are held to a higher standard than a general practitioner. And people need to know that.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that you talk about peer pressure because that's one of the things that makes Joey's legacy so important because I know just in my little area where I am, there's so many veterinarians around here and groomers, and it can be really hard and scary to speak out against a vet who's right down the street, right? So even if you went to the vet down the street and said, "Well, what do you think about this?" There's a good chance that maybe that vet knows that vet. Maybe they're friends, maybe they've worked together. I know a lot of vets that work in a place and then one leaves and then they end up kind of working all around and they've been very close colleagues. So that's why Joey's legacy is so great, right? Because there's a good chance you won't even know the vet of the records that you're looking at.
Mostly I don't.
Yeah.
Absolutely. If there was any close former relationship, I would have to recuse myself. Not because I felt I couldn't be objective, but because the appearance of it is not good. But remember, when a veterinarian's working in one practice and then leaves either to join another one or open their own practice, there's a competitive nature also going on.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
not necessarily collegially protecting a colleague. It could be the opposite.
Right. Absolutely. I've seen that many times too, where I've even seen vets badmouth the vet that they worked with for 20 years. And now you're badmouthing them because they're your competition or you're angry. I see that in the grooming industry too, where groomers will leave and then they say, "Oh, that groomer was not very good." Well, she was good last week when you told. So yeah, you're right. It can go both ways. So that's another reason why Joey's legacy is going to be so great on both aspects because as a pet parent, you don't want to be told by another veterinarian down the street that it's malpractice if it's not malpractice because it's going to lead you down a road that is not going to be good for anybody, I would imagine.
Right.
That's the worst thing.
Yeah, we had a famous story of someone who went into a very newly appointed, beautiful veterinary practice and asked, "What does it cost to spay my female dog?" And they said, I don't know, $727. And the person said, "What? Oh, yes, you've got a giant breed dog. It's more dangerous and whatever." And the person said, "Well, let me think about it." Walked out the door, went down the road about one block to another veterinary practice and said, what will it cost to spay my giant breed dog? And they said $450. They said, "Fine." So the person went back to the first clinic and said, "By the way, your colleague down the road says it's only $450 to do that." So the fancy vet said, "Oh, okay, we'll do it for that." She said, "Like hell."
Yeah.
Left.
Right. No, well, good for her. That's another thing when you talk about veterinary medicine. If somebody's willing to make a deal all of a sudden, then they were ripping you off in the first place.
Exactly.
Not going to go lower than what it costs them to do it. So I think you have to be really careful. And sometimes the high prices are warranted, and sometimes they're just there because people want to gouge you a little bit. I see that a little bit in it. I know that you're not. Have you ever served on the veterinary board?
No.
No. So maybe this question won't. Well, I didn't know how much you knew about it, but how many people serve on the veterinary board? Do you know?
In California, it's usually about 6. The problem is that they're not all small animal practitioners. Sometimes they're, of course, they should be a large animal as well, and sometimes they're from industry. But one of the problems you get is in certain parts of California, for example, the review boards are mostly large animal versus small animal. Well, that makes a bias if you have a small animal case, because they may not understand the nuances of small animal medicine versus large animal medicine, depending on what it is. And we've had one case like that, where the large animal practitioners didn't think something was done properly, when in fact they had no idea what was normally done in small animals at that time.
So as a veterinarian, what do you think would be how many people? Because I feel like 6 is a very small number.
Each member can ask other people as an expert. For example, if a
Okay.
case is something that they're not particularly comfortable with, they can ask experts for their written or review opinion as well. So it isn't just the 6 people. It can be 12 people, or depending on the case and what's necessary. I mean, what if it's an avian case, right? And you have a parrot with a very unique problem, and there's nobody on the veterinary medical board that's an expert in parrots, you know?
Oh my
You would
goodness.
ask someone to look at that, you know.
Okay.
Mhm.
But not necessarily somebody on the board. But
Correct.
they would
Correct.
they would
Advisor, right.
okay. So they would bring in a parrot expert. But that does pose a problem, right? If we have veterinary malpractice and half the board isn't, and then it could come down to one person.
Well, yes, but then when, let's say, we're just using a fictitious
Sure.
example. So the parrot expert would write something, and if the parrot expert clearly has all the references and the documentation and the experience, that person's would probably hold a lot of weight.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, if someone asked me, for example, about something that I've spent my life studying, inherited bleeding disorders in pets, you wouldn't need more than myself with all of the references and the people I know to
True.
be an expert when I deal with it in people as well. So
Yeah.
I would unlikely generate another opinion. I mean, it could, but probably not.
Do you see any pretty obvious problems with the veterinary board when it comes to dealing with veterinary malpractice? Something you think should be changed?
Well, I haven't had enough instances where I've been involved in malpractice at the board. Certainly not in California. I have in New York, for example, and in Ontario, but that's many, many years ago now, and everything has changed since then. So I don't
Yeah.
have enough experience to have found anything. I think that people honestly do the best they can, and nobody wants this kind of job. I mean, it may sound very prestigious and, you know, good for your curriculum vitae, but you do it as a public service, you know.
Really? Was there a difference between the boards in, you said Ontario and where
Mhm.
else?
And New York State.
So is there a big difference between how Canada, you're talking about Ontario, Canada, I assume,
Right. Right.
and New York? Was there a
Sure.
difference?
Yes, the Canadians are much more conservative and they're much more stiff upper lip. New York and California don't get along very well when it comes to what's going on, because it's a perception in our country that the experts are on the East Coast or the West Coast and they don't communicate very well. But the reality is they're different diseases in different parts of the world. We're thousands of miles apart. So what we see as common diseases, for example, in southern, you know, in Mexico and South America and north of us, versus what they see in New York or the Maritimes or Florida, for example, they're going to be quite different, especially with all of the temperature and climate changes and hurricanes and stuff that we've been seeing, and that changes everything.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because then if you had, this is a good example. My son's dog, I've worked with dogs for a very long time, let's just say. And my son called me. His dog was having some upset stomach issues. He now lives in the, like, way up in the northwestern part of the state, up in the Seattle area, kind of there. And, my first thought was possibly Giardia. He's around rivers and lakes and stuff. Anyway, it turned out to be this crazy thing I had never heard of. And I thought I've heard of everything. And it is only in that area. So even if you had a small animal, I'm thinking about the veterinary board. If you had a veterinary board and one of the people on the veterinary board only came from a certain part of the state, you could also have a problem. And if they don't recognize that, they could possibly accuse somebody of malpractice when in fact it may not be. That's just one example I'm thinking about. Yeah, different parts of the country also can affect someone's, what they believe and what they think. I was sure this dog had Giardia. Like, it had all
Well,
the symptoms of Giardia.
everybody's been exposed, right? You know, there was a horrible thing that speaks to that some years ago now, when my husband was concerned about one of his former employees who suddenly went Christmas caroling in the Santa Barbara area, and she was in early pregnancy.
Uh-oh.
And she didn't, nobody really knew that at the time. And she got incredibly ill, and she had these rashes and whatever. And she went to Scripps, she went to Cedar, she went everywhere. And Charles was telling me one night, we were doing the dishes, about her. And I said, my God, if she was a dog, she'd have valley fever.
Oh, wow.
They never checked for Santa Barbara for the spores of coccidioidomycosis, valley fever. And that's what she had.
Oh my goodness.
And she died.
Oh no.
Why did she die? Because she was pregnant. And so when someone has this fungal disease and they're pregnant, it's very serious. And you know what happened? They saved the baby. And her
Oh.
husband lost his job.
Oh.
This is a horrible story, but it tells you exactly what you're talking about. How
Yeah.
different it was in that part. And they didn't put the history together of her Christmas caroling because the spores can live in the ground, dry ground, for 20 years.
Wow. Wow. No, it's important when that's why we talk all the time about getting second opinions, because people put a lot of pressure on veterinarians, that
Hmm.
veterinarians are supposed to know absolutely everything and everything and everything and everything. And it's impossible. It's literally impossible to know every single thing that's going on. And when they do that, they don't seek second and third opinions. And it's not, because I always tell people, stop being so loyal to your veterinarian. I'm not saying that you have to hop and jump, but you also need to know that that veterinarian may just not have had that experience yet.
Exactly.
And that's all it is. And it's not malpractice or those kind of things. So I've had those cases. I've had a case one time where a dog, I was sure, had mites. I knew it had mites. You couldn't put the dog out, and he was a puppy. Couldn't put the dog down on the ground without him tearing at himself. So I asked the owner the history. Where did you get the dog? And the first thing she told me is she got it on the border of Tijuana and San
Yeah.
Diego. And I
Yeah.
knew, I said, this is mites. And she says, the vet says it's not. And I'm like, it is. And they've ultimately, she had to push and push and push and get the scraping, and it turned out to be mites. Do I think that vet's a bad vet? No, I think he's never seen those kind of mites before. So I
Yes.
don't know.
If I hadn't known about valley fever in dogs, I would never have thought about that when my
Right.
husband was telling her about his paralegal. I mean, it just fit perfectly because of
Yeah.
where she's been.
Yeah. Well, it's important, and that is how you can, working with your veterinarian, talking to them, getting second and third opinions. I know we talk about that all the time. If we're going to stop veterinary malpractice, we as pet parents have to be proactive. We can't just sit back and go, oh, we'll just, I know this is the goal of Joey's legacy, is to get the laws changed, to get things changed, but we still have an active role as pet parents and the voices of our animals to seek second and third opinions, to make sure that your animal is protected. It's not always about malpractice. It's always about the care of your animal. So I'm a huge, huge supporter in second and third opinions. And the veterinarians that I refer to, that I like, are in favor of second and third opinions. They're not going to be mad if you say, oh, I'm just going to get a second opinion. So, right? I mean, I don't
That's
think,
correct.
yeah,
Mhm.
I can't imagine Dr. Dodds going, no.
No, no, please, as many opinions as you need is what we need.
I know everything. Scott,
Yeah.
since you've had, I don't know if you know the answer to this, since you started Joey's Legacy, how many cases have come across, not necessarily have gone through, but do you know how many cases have come across your table?
Yeah. I mean, we've received over 400 inquiries in the past, since October of 2017. Uh, some of them are just wanting from the veterinarian. They have no pursuing the vet if there is if a decision is rendered that malpractice or negligence occurred, some want to seek legal action. So the answer is over 400 in the past almost 4 years.
So 400 cases have come across. And some people think, oh, this is 400 cases, but that's just, you haven't even been around long enough for people to find you. That's the other reason why
Right.
we're doing this, is people don't think they have, anywhere to go. You
Right.
find out, I just had a client, she brought her cat in to get neutered, and the cat passed away, and then she couldn't get the veterinarian to even respond to her at all. Nothing. They just kept saying they were too busy, that she wanted to see the cat. They said they can't, they're busy. She wanted to get her records, they wouldn't give her the records. And this went on and on and on. And then she called me, and she's just like, I can't believe it. Is this how this goes? And I said, no, no, I actually told her to contact you. I said, no, they have to give you the records. They
Right.
can't just say, oh, sorry, your cat died and we're too busy to talk to you further than that. So
Right. We
so
have about 85 in the United States, and
yeah.
the only agency that I believe keeps accurate records, and they may not even be that accurate, is PLIT, the veterinarians. They may keep accurate records, of course, and I haven't disclosed them,
really know for sure, obviously, and it's kind of a ridiculous.
Are you there?
On me if they've ever had a bad experience. I think the ratio of most will say that they've never had a bad, but it's also going to raise the number that have. It's just never going to know what we just said. Ask Dr. Dodds a question if I could.
Sure.
You there?
Dr. Dodds? Can you hear?
Yes, I'm here.
The
Florida Board of Veterinary Medicine is made up of 5
practicing veterinarians.
Scott, you're
Yeah, I can't hear.
you're breaking up a little bit, Scott.
All right. So
is made up of 5 practicing veterinarians and 2 consumer advocates.
now
Compare that with a situation where you might have one way or the other about how things might
be different.
I'm not sure what the question was. Carrie, did you hear it?
Yeah, let me help. Scott, you're breaking up a little bit, so it was hard for us to get the question. If you want to try it again or maybe type it in.
All right.
did you see where I typed in Kristina will be here in about 10 minutes?
Did you see that? Or
No.
and I think we're
No, I haven't
all
seen
right.
it.
Okay. I'm not sure what's going.
Actually, if I
I know you,
everybody,
Lori.
can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So the program, the streaming software, is basically taking the videos on and off due to internet connectivity issues that Jerry and Scott are both experiencing. So when you see it go away, it'll come back as soon as their connection is stable.
Okay.
You all know.
Well,
Still see and hear you.
Okay. We're just looking
Okay.
for, did you see anywhere where there was some questions written? Because I can't get
Yes,
through
it's
to,
in the chat.
I don't see the chat, Lori.
You have
Let me see.
to if you're it's to
Oh,
the
I see it.
right
Okay.
of your screen.
I see it. I see it. I see
Just
it.
toggle
Okay.
over to chat.
Okay. I see where you
Okay.
put Kristina will join us in about 10 minutes.
Mhm.
right.
I'm
Dr.
sorry,
Dodds,
I didn't
can you
see
hear me? Dr. Dodds?
Yes, Scott, I'm here. I'm happy to answer your question, but I couldn't hear it. Sorry.
Okay. The question was, the Florida Board of Veterinary Medicine is made up of 5 practicing veterinarians and 2 consumer advocates. I
Mhm.
wonder what your thoughts were regarding a situation where it would be flipped. In other words, 5 consumers and 2 veterinarians. Do you have any thoughts one way or the other?
Oh, I don't think that's a good idea. I think we need to have a more balance, however. I don't think you should have 5 veterinarians and 2 consumers. I think you should have almost an equal amount of each. I don't think having just 2 consumers is a proper representation either. I think
Okay,
you need,
so
because they each
right.
totally different, valid, important contributions to make.
All right.
in
So
my-
do you feel you feel there's no real need for 5 veterinarians on a board of veterinary medicine? Would you agree with that?
No, I didn't say that. I think it depends. I mean, we have 6, I think, in California. I would think 4 might be enough, and I think you need to have an equal number of consumers. And I think both groups should be able to ask advisors that are experts in that particular field, like an ethical issue or a physiological issue or whatever,
Okay.
to give their opinion as well.
Okay. Well, obviously, since the and when it comes to a vote and majority rules, and it's 5 versus 2 right now, and that's the way it is in most with. You can see how it's going to go, basically.
Oh, yeah, that's ridiculous. That's not
Yeah,
fair. But
right.
think how many things in our legal system at any walk of life today are balanced properly. For example, look at university laboratory animal care and use committees. For decades, and I was involved in helping to write the NIH guide for care and use of laboratory animals, there was no public member, nobody representing the public on those committees. And
Right.
they would have 1 and then 2 and then 3. And we had National Academy of Sciences panels there where we said, wait a minute, you guys have a conflict of interest. You're protecting your turf. You can't do that. You have to have the public tell you what their concerns are, and you have to respond to that. And it's worked so far, even though there's still fewer public members than there are investigator members. But these animal care and use committees have to have people from different walks of the university. In other words, not just the surgeons, not just the medical people, but the ethical people, the psychologists and whatever. So it has to be balanced, and that's good.
Yeah. Yeah. We have Kristina just joined us. So Kristina, hi, how are you?
I'm so sorry I'm late. It was a late.
Hey,
That's
train.
okay.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
No, we appreciate you being here. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got into doing animal law, a little bit about you, just so before we get going?
Yeah, sure. So I've been practicing law for about 8 years now. I've had my own law practice, or my own law firm, for about 4 of those 8. I started practicing in Philadelphia. I was actually doing family law at the time, and I just had some really awesome bosses, and they said, hey, is there anything else you'd like to do? And I said, how about animal law and environmental law? And they said, what's animal law? And I said, I don't know. Let's find out. And so we put it on the website. And the next thing we know, I was getting calls from people who were throwing down fisticuffs in the street over their neighbors stealing their dogs. So that was my first bite into animal law.
Wow. What made you want to do? Do you have an animal? Had you ever seen veterinary malpractice or?
Oh, personally, thankfully, no. I have not experienced veterinary malpractice. I do have an animal. I have a cat and a dog who are.
Looks like I see somebody. Somebody's running around.
She's hiding. Yeah, she's camera shy. But yeah, I've got a cat and a dog, and I like to joke that they're my office assistants.
So I usually have our attorneys, just so people have a better understanding of what veterinary malpractice is and negligence, because those get kind of misguided. People don't really understand. I don't know if you have a great definition or an example you can give us of what veterinary malpractice would be versus negligence.
That's a great question. So regular negligence is I owe a duty of care of being a decent human being to someone else. So that's why if I hit you with my car, that's negligence, because I owe you a duty of care not to hit you with my car. Veterinary malpractice is a little more than negligence in that a veterinarian owes you the duty of care that a veterinarian of that same level owes to all patients, clients. So the veterinarians are not measured by the standard of a reasonable person like I am. I'm just a regular person driving my car. Veterinarians are held to the standard of other veterinarians in their area. It's usually pretty specific. It sometimes can even be area specific depending on the case. So like if you have a veterinarian who's out in rural Alaska and they don't have access to, I don't know, the most cutting edge technology on cancer treatments, that veterinarian is not going to be held to the standard of care of a veterinarian in Los Angeles who might have better and greater access to the most cutting edge cancer treatments for an animal. That veterinarian is only going to be held to the standard of care of other veterinarians in that area in Alaska. So veterinary malpractice can sometimes be area specific, but generally speaking, it's, did that veterinarian meet the standard of care that veterinarians are expected to meet?
Okay.
That's very good. That's excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That was a great, it's important because we're really going after veterinary malpractice, and sometimes people don't really understand the difference between that. So I always have our vets our attorneys start off with that little definition. It helps us. Actually, that was a really great definition.
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
Kristina, what's the bite into law? You joined us in law, dear.
Oh, yeah. Well, I like to think I feel like I'm leading the pack in animal law. No, I'm kidding. I like to make animal puns.
No, that's perfect.
Pulling your chain.
You're in good company. We'll get your animal puns.
Right? No, totally. Thanks.
So when you started doing it, did you see, this is Dr. Dodds above you. She's a veterinarian. So this is Dr. Jean Dodds.
Yeah, Dr.
I
Dodds.
feel like we're on four squares, right?
Right? The
probably-
big Brady
University
Bunch.
of Pennsylvania, so as an adjunct professor, so many years
Oh.
ago.
Oh, very
in
cool.
Pennsylvania.
Hmm.
And you're practicing law, Kristina, in Pennsylvania, correct?
Colorado.
Oh, and you're in Colorado. Okay.
Yeah.
So when you first had this idea to do animal law, did you have any idea where it was going and that you weren't going to ever make any money doing that?
No, I didn't have any idea where it was going. I didn't. I mean, I honestly didn't expect much to come out of it. I expected more to come out of environmental law, because at the time when I was living outside of Philly, they might still be doing it, putting in natural gas pipelines all and up and down along the coast. So there was a lot of people that were getting natural gas pipelines put through their backyards. And so a lot of people were really upset about it. So I assumed that was going to take off and I was going to be the champion of the homeowner, right? Rather than the oil and gas company. But, they didn't want to pay me. And so that didn't last very long. But yeah, then, I was just getting calls left and right from people who got their pets stolen, ex-partners breaking up and taking pets and then veterinary malpractice. I had a case. One of my first cases was suing the Pennsylvania State Police for shooting someone's dog. So yeah, I mean, I didn't expect it to be what it's turned into, but it's been a really interesting and rewarding career. So I'm glad I did it.
I feel like it would be really rewarding, mostly because there's so much room for change, right? When you look at the law and how far we need to go. So, and when we need to go, we have a long road ahead of us to get. So in the state of Colorado, how are animals seen right now as far as the law sees them?
I mean, as far as I know, this is true of the entire country, but in Colorado, animals are property. They're personal property, which is different from real property. So real property is your house, that you own. You don't rent your house. You have a mortgage maybe, but that's real property. Personal property is your car, your couch, your chair, your books, your bed, whatever. So animals are basically in Colorado on the same level as a car or a couch or a dining room table.
When I was leaving work today, one of my clients stopped me and she says, "Oh, are you leaving for the day?" And I said, "No, I'll be back. I'm going to go do this roundtable with an attorney and a vet and some people that started an organization." I'm explaining it to her and she says, "They consider dogs property?" And I said, "Yeah, it's shocking to me how many people don't even know that that's the case, that their animal that they love, that they've cared for, that they've raised, that they invested time and money into, is really could come down to $50. If you possibly got your dog at an animal shelter and they could end up being like that. It's surprising to me.
There are some cases, though, where there's been some secondary awards for emotional suffering.
Really?
Yes, there are some, and there's a handful of cases where that's happened. It doesn't mean that the people are satisfied at all. I mean,
Sure.
for the loved one. But
Sure.
yes, the property thing is disgusting, but hopefully more and more people will understand, especially with the pandemic, that we need all the living things around us to make us feel fulfilled.
Yeah.
And they
Yeah.
need our care and we need their care, So
Yeah.
that will change things, at least in the minds of those people that have felt so alone without their animals to care for them and they care for them in return, during this period of lockdown.
Yeah. Well, look what happened during the pandemic. The pounds were empty. That's the
Yep.
first thing people did was gravitate to something else that could give them emotional, whatever it is they were doing. And how funny was it? It still makes me giggle a little bit. Did you guys see those cartoons where the dogs were like, "Not another walk"?
Yeah.
Because the whole family's out walking constantly and taking them out for
Right.
walks. It made me laugh so much. I was like, "Oh my gosh, these poor dogs." But it's on. Do you know what states those were in, Dr. Dodds, that they awarded?
In California, I think was there one in Texas or not Colorado? There was
don't
one
know.
on the East Coast too. They weren't a lot of difference,
Yeah.
but there was an acknowledgement by the judge that there was emotional component involved and the people need to have some redress for that.
That's where it starts.
Yeah, there was one in California because I think I told you guys on the last call that we had a judge in Orange County that said, "What is this kerfuffle in the courtroom all about?"
Oh, yeah.
And my husband went in. He said he was the attorney at the time representing us because one of our greyhounds was adopted, and then they took it to the pound rather than admit they couldn't care for it. And we have a contract that the animal had to come back to us. Anyway, we found out about it. Somebody was in the pound and saw the dog. It was a blue greyhound, and they said, could it have come from Hemopet? Which it did. So anyway, the judge says to my husband, "Come into my chambers." And he looks at my husband and he says, "What is this about? I have an Akita." And so we won.
Aww.
Here was an example where the judge went beyond the property thing, said, this is a dispute about whether we took precedence to keep the animal and get it back versus his order to put it to sleep. I mean, the pet owner, the pet,
Yeah.
Wow.
whatever. And
Oh
we
my
won.
gosh.
We got the dog back. So here was a judge who had a dog who personally decided that he would solve the case, which was great.
Yeah, it's the beginning. Kristina, have you you said 8 years ago you started. Have you noticed a change at all in that 8 years?
I have noticed a change in that judges, when I first, so it's a little hard because I started in Philly and now I'm out in Colorado, but I mean, overall, in Colorado, I can say for sure that I have noticed that since I've started to now, that when I go in there, judges are like more willing to listen to the case, more willing to give it credence, more willing to acknowledge the emotional attachment. They're more willing to give the case time. Whereas when I first started, they were like, this is stupid. Go mediate.
Oh, wow.
I don't want to deal with this. This is a dog. I don't care. But now they're more willing to be like, okay, we're seeing a lot more of these cases. This is something that the people, because I mean, it's a government entity. I mean, here in
Sure.
Colorado, judges are appointed, but you still have to have some response to the public. I mean,
Right. It's
judges,
not once they start realizing it's not just one crazy person,
right.
their courtroom's getting, and so that is such a good point because we talk about on this roundtable all the time, like, what do we do to make it, sometimes people just think, well, what's going to happen? I'm going to spend all this time and money and I'm going to go in front of the judge and the judge is going to say, too bad. But that's a good point, that the more we flood the courts with these little cases that don't mean anything, the more the judges will listen. Just like you said, it's such a great point, is it may seem like it's little, but that's what we have to do, right?
Right. I mean, I like to liken this to Brown versus Board of Education. For the longest time, African Americans were considered property, and then they were considered 1/3 of a person, and then I know this isn't the same, and I'm not trying to at all. I'm so sorry. Now she wants to join us. I'm not trying to diminish the African American struggle for sovereignty and independence and self-determination, but I mean, the case law is what I'm getting at, is that it was slow changes over a period of time where for the longest time that society views this as okay. The laws on the book said this is okay. But eventually society changed its opinion, got educated, became enlightened, and said, actually, no, this isn't okay. Our laws are wrong. And then the courts decided cases like Brown versus Board of Education, which were monumental in terms of determining rights for African Americans, but that's the way the courts move so slow. They're going to take a long time to change, but they do change with the tide of public opinion. I mean, same thing for cases like Roe versus Wade. And I'm not trying to bring up like controversial political stuff, but the fact of the matter is that when the public opinion changes, that's when the judicial opinions of judges starts to change, and it starts to reflect back what society wants as a whole.
Right. Well, I think it's a great point, and it's one we haven't really made too much on this roundtable. Those are great examples. I am also want to go on record as saying nobody's minimizing what they went through to get that, but it's such a good point that it can take just the society changing their viewpoint to change the court system. And I want to bring that up because a lot of times I feel like people just kind of just go, forget it, I'm not going to do it. It's just not, and the more people that say they're not going to do it, the more times those are missed opportunities, I would say. So it's been amazing. What do you see a lot of in malpractice cases? Does it seem to be the same type of cases? I know you mentioned people stealing dogs, but in veterinary malpractice, what do you see? I can't believe someone steals dogs. I mean, the pounds have tons of them. I don't know why they need to steal a dog, but
that was an excellent question. So what do I am not sure. I feel like veterinary malpractice comes in a lot of different forms. I think primarily the main issue is a lack of communication. And I know Joey's Legacy talks about that a lot, that it seems like a lot of times pet owners feel like they weren't communicated with properly in order to give informed consent to do or not do something. But I mean, I've seen, like, I had a lady call me yesterday who said that the veterinarian or the vet tech, I can't remember, did not change her dog's splint correctly, and now her dog is in surgery because he might lose his leg. And I was like, how does that happen? You know, so I mean, veterinary malpractice comes in all different shapes and sizes. I can't say that there's one particular flavor that I see more often than another.
There is not well, tell us a little bit about what informed consent is and whether or not legally veterinarians have to have something signed that's and how far does that go? And the reason I'm asking this question real quick to give you kind of a background is I have a client who's very upset that she left the dog there during COVID, right? So she wasn't able to go in, and she says she told them she did not want to get any vaccines while the dog was there, and she also told him no flea and tick medications. And the vet did it anyway, both vaccinated, and it wasn't rabies, it was distemper parvo. And then she put flea and tick. And when the owner said, I told you not to do this, she says, well, it's my policy, and just said nothing.
Have that case. I already have been asked about that case. Case, and I can tell you absolutely you have to have informed consent. It does not have to be written. It can be oral, as long as the case record that the veterinarian has said discussed X and Y with client Z and agreed, and that the client sees that that's written on the record. That's good enough. You don't have to have them do informed consent. And when people come to our clinic on referral, we write down everything that we've talked about, and we make them sign that in writing that they've agreed that that's what we're doing before we do anything, because we want to be 1,000% sure that that veterinarian has given us informed consent to do the testing or the exams or dispensing whatever we're going to dispense. So you have to have informed consent. It's critical. It's really, really important.
So the client needs to write down what they do not want, is what you're saying.
That's
because if it's verbally said, right, if it's verbally said while you're in the car on the phone and you tell the vet, hey, I don't want this vaccine or that vaccine, you need to
reiterate that. Yeah, this particular veterinarian, according to the client, said, well, that's our policy, take it or leave it. Well, she's going to leave it and hopefully, report them. That's incorrect.
Yeah.
And the dog was already taking a flea and tick medication.
Yeah, I've been hearing a lot of veterinarians responding with that's our policy. In particular, flea and tick medication. We can't let any dog in our building without the flea and tick stuff. I've also heard the vaccines. I was just told that the other day if I wanted to get my dog done. Well, it wasn't the other day. I always say the other day when it turns out it was a couple years ago, that they wouldn't take my dog in to do a spay unless she was vaccinated the same day. And so I just kind of laughed at that because I've learned a
But
lot from Dr.
that,
Dodds.
that's changing. And just so you know, the latest flea and tick paper that we submitted 3 weeks ago has been accepted without any change. So this is 2 major publications now outlining what the FDA has said as of April 17th, 2021, about all the different flea and tick medications that are on the market today.
And
How
that
many
is
adverse reactions have been reported and how many deaths for each one?
Wow.
that was submitted to the AVMA.
No, the AVMA is supported by a lot of big pharma, okay?
Right.
No, a separate, highly peer-reviewed journal, not to
Okay.
be named at this point.
That's okay, but it's a peer reviewed. That's
Oh,
awesome.
absolutely.
It's amazing because
Second- yeah.
I hear mostly from veterinary technicians that how safe it is, and there's all these studies that it's safe. So it's awesome to have a peer
People
reviewed.
that work for the companies say that they give them to their own pets. But
I
you know what?
know.
2 class action suits now, one in Quebec and one in New Jersey. Class
Okay.
action suit against failure to disclose the appropriate information about these products and then the adverse effects. So we're going to win eventually.
Yeah. Does a veterinarian okay, so when I get a drug from even the grocery store, it'll have the insert in it, right? We've talked about this. But when your dog gets a drug, there's no you don't even know what it is. Sometimes they just give you the drug right there in the hospital. Is there something that says a veterinarian needs to give that?
Well, you can get that insert from anything. It should come with it. If it doesn't, you go online and ask Dr. Google what the situation is. You can even click on it and get the product insert if it wasn't for some reason. You know, sometimes these things come in bulk, and so there aren't enough inserts for every single time you do it. But the clinic should tell the client, we can print it for you or you can get it yourself and on this website before they give the product, okay?
Kristina, have you taken any cases of like vaccines where people are trying to fight for veterinary malpractice of a dog getting a vaccine that they asked not to be given?
I know I've done several consultations on that issue, and maybe not vaccines, but certain medications that have been used or that were contraindicated for the condition or something like that. But unfortunately, again, like sometimes these cases don't get litigated because they're so expensive to litigate, and so they don't end up going forward. So we usually end up writing a letter and settling.
Yeah.
You know, so, but I mean, yeah, I have done several consultations for that, or I've written letters for that. And well, I guess that was the end of your question. So yeah, I'll let you ask a follow-up. Sorry.
No, it's okay. Go ahead, Dr. Dodds.
The company will actually pay the bill for the client, even though they don't litigate it, because they know that there is a warning and that it wasn't conveyed properly. And sometimes to keep their goodwill, I use that advisedly, they'll pay the client's bill. Now, some clients won't accept the money. They say, forget it. I'm not taking your money. I'm going to keep pursuing this through other avenues.
Yeah. The flea and tick medication, if anyone's, people, any of our listeners, people who are listening to this, if you become victim of that, and I have been victim of it, but I was very young and didn't know, please fight it. That's just my personal request. Please fight it. And if you need help fighting it, your girl. I had a dog die from flea and tick medication. I just didn't know. I didn't know. And I continued to put it on her at the belief that my vet knew. And I don't even blame the vet at this point because it was so long ago that I don't think the veterinarian that I was working for at the time even knew that was what was causing her seizures. But I think vets know now. I think any veterinarian that is still using flea and tick medication, I'm sorry, in their practice I think they're negligent. I think it's malpractice in my opinion. I don't know how we can make that malpractice. Kristina, maybe you would know how that would work. What we're talking about is flea and tick medication. The FDA is now, Dr. Dodds has now peer-reviewed cases. The animals are dying from taking this stuff. It's not a joke, and it's a lot of them. but veterinarians are still pushing it and wanting to put on. Do you think that that is something that we could be going after in a malpractice suit?
I think so, but a lot of times the issue with product, so this kind of reminds me of like environmental litigation, right? So if you get let's say you live next to a power plant and you get cancer, a lot of times the companies that make the power plant will say, well, how do we know you got cancer from my power plant, that you didn't get cancer from the food you eat or your heritage or whatever, your family background, your genetics, whatever. And it's really, really hard to prove that, because you have to have some serious experts get involved, and also like a really good medical history to say that, yeah, I didn't have any symptoms of anything until I moved next door to this power plant, right? So it's the same sort of thing, because I've had consultations with people who have called me saying that in their apartment. So again, sorry, I don't mean to keep going off veterinary malpractice, but it's the same thing. Like they'll say their apartment's spraying pesticides, right? And they've asked them to, hey, don't spray pesticides outside my townhome because it's giving my, like, I've heard that this can hurt my dog, and they do it anyway. And then the dog gets seizures and it dies. So it's the same sort of thing. Like, those cases are hard to prove, because how do we prove that it was the flea and tick medicine that caused the dog's death, and not some other external factor, that the dog didn't get into the trash and eat something, or the dog didn't have a bad genetic history, especially if it's a shelter dog. You don't know anything about that dog or its history. Or even with purebreds, the same thing. I mean, you can still have bad genetics in purebreds as well, but
Yeah.
it's just harder to trace a shelter dog than it is a purebred. But I mean,
Yeah.
so, that's what makes flea and tick medicine arguments, or any kind of medicine arguments, hard for veterinary malpractice. But it can be done. You just have to get the right experts to be able to help prove the case.
Yeah,
Document.
it's being done. And the problem is, you're right. There are going to be animals with comorbidities, just like SARS-CoV-2. It's the same situation, that are more at risk. The problem is that the companies refuse to put the warnings on the label. That was what happened a year ago. They did it in Canada. They did it in the European Medicines Agency. They wouldn't do it in America. The FDA finally, there's an expert group that I'm involved in, non-paid, and we talked to them and we gave them our data before the first paper was published. And they said, yes, the warning has to be on the label. So even though you can't prove it might have done it, okay, these ones that are recognized by the FDA under the Freedom of Information Act as being deaths directly related to the use of these poisons, that animal wasn't warned, the people weren't warned about. So we are getting, I mean, it's complicated, but we're getting awareness and knowledge and informed consent to give these products. We have a veterinarian on the East Coast in our group whose other veterinarian, this is a seizuring dog, was given a 90-day product that is known to produce seizures and aggression. And the veterinarian said, we're still going to do it to keep the animal away from fleas and ticks for 90 days. But if the seizures get worse, just add another anticonvulsant. What the heck is that?
That's crazy.
I
That
don't
sounds
know.
like malpractice.
I'm just giggling because I love Dr. Dodds' passion. Like, I just,
Sorry.
because I get so angry, and then I have to try to, but when she does it, then I'm like, see, it's okay if I get angry. Dr. Dodds gets angry too, so I'm good. It is so frustrating, but what you're saying to us is we need to keep our records, because if we're going to
Yeah.
prove that flea and tick medication caused seizures, and you were in the vet and their blood test came back normal, and then you put the stuff on and the dog had a seizure the next day, we have a better case than I didn't know anything about this dog, never been to the vet, bought some flea and tick stuff, and now he's got seizures. So that's what we need to do. We got to keep our records. From the time you get that dog, you need to keep the records. And probably a good idea, a lot of people don't do this. I'm a big advocate of this. Just take your healthy dog into the vet and get
Yeah.
some blood work done.
Yeah.
And see, you think your dog is healthy, but I got to tell you, a lot of dogs, cats as well, they do not tell you what's going on. You will never know that they're feeling lethargic until until they're so lethargic that they won't get up and do anything. And you want to catch that ahead of time, but that would be perfect in this case too. You take in a healthy animal. I take mine. Dr. Dodds probably will have a better time frame, but I take mine in about every 15, 16, 18 months and I run a blood test. So I don't
I
know
do
if that's,
annually, my dear,
and I
annually.
know, I know, I know.
By the way, the class action suit in Quebec involved a perfectly healthy boxer that was 5 years old, did exactly what you're telling, went in for the annual checkup, whatever, was given a product, and 5 days later died of hepatic necrosis. Proven.
Wow.
Drugs still in the liver.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's because she had the test before. And so
Right.
she was able to compare the two. So we need to get these tests. Dr. Dodds, I will see you next week. Dang it. I know I'm a bad girl. I've been bad. I got to get them in. So, but we have a question from Honey. Honey wants to know, Dr. Dodds, this is for you. What about CPR? She says, I marked and signed paperwork for CPR during her pet Kopi's admission to an emergency room. However, according to the ER vet, on her comments, she claimed that I had changed my mind and told her on the phone, no DNR. That's do not resuscitate for anybody who's not. What do you think, Dr. Dodds? Do you think that she didn't read the initial paperwork?
I have no idea. The problem is you can't prove it if it was only a phone call. I mean, there's no way to prove that that's in fact what happened, because there's two differences of opinion of what was it, CPR, was it DNR? I didn't hear the acronym. I don't know. I mean, I feel empathetic, absolutely, but I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. That's, and that you just, when you're in these situations, it's so hard to think I need to get everything written down. I need to get it like I've been to many vets that I left my dogs with, and I've never, a lot of times, haven't thought to get every detail written down. But in these cases, we find time and time again, right, Kristina, the records are all we have. We don't have a witness because our animals can't speak. So we have to have proof and records, and I guess it's probably uncomfortable a lot, right? Because you build this rapport with your veterinarian, and then you feel uncomfortable asking for every single thing written down, but unfortunately that's the time and where we are. And it's heartbreaking. I'm so sorry, honey, to hear that situation. It kind of has thrown me for a loop a little bit. Jerry, why don't you tell us a little bit? We've kind of cut you guys out of this a little bit, and you're who's going to make this change. Tell us what's going on with the documentary.
Carrie, I'm so excited about this, and everybody on Joy's legacy that has been affected by this should be excited. I've run across a gentleman that is interested in animals. He's doing a documentary on medical malpractice right now that he's finishing up. And he is so interested in this. I sent him a book, and he to him this week in Fort Myers. He let me stay at his house and chauffeured me around and introduced me to some wealthy people that are going to donate. I hope we need the donations to get this to happen. But when he let me out of the car at the airport Sunday, he told me, he said, this is going to happen. We're going to make it happen. You got a bunch of good people. We talked about, we have 2,500 members, but we only have maybe 50 to 100 that are really out there working. But we have some that are real cheerleaders. One gal I talked to is going to horse farm because horse people are like dog people. They love their animals, and they tend to have more money than dog people do because horses are so expensive. But the documentarian that I'm using, or we're using, he has 9 Emmys. He's done stuff from 9. Interviewed the Pope. He's been all over the world, and he's very well known. And he will then take this documentary once it's done. He'll take it to Sundance Film Festival and other film festivals. And the good thing about John is he's been doing it 40 years, so he knows everybody at these film festivals. He knows History Channel people, National Geo people. His clients is PBS, which I believe was
in the world.
And when I got out
The Corey said we're going to get this on
PBS
PBS as soon as it comes out. So I'm excited.
everybody should be excited. I think we're getting ready to let, my book is one thing, but a documentary on cable
all over the world is in a whole different league.
though I don't think it could have ever happened. The other thing is none of it would have happened if it wasn't for Scott.
He is really the instigator
in this entire ball game.
I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Scott.
And y'all wouldn't be here if it. But now the members enjoy his
legacy. If they want this platform,
to invest a little bit. Several of them have
invested a lot,
and
but we need more.
I mean, if we're going to do it, we need
to raise $100,000, and we're at about
between 25 and 30. So I want everybody to get out their pocketbook and write a great big check, and let's get this done.
We're going to be doing a few. I know I'm going to be putting together a charity.
Especially all.
What?
Yeah,
especially all the rich doctors and lawyers.
I saw some of the donations. And I'm pretty amazed, Kristina. I'm pretty amazed at some of the donations they're making.
I love that about Jerry. He has no fear. He's like, give it up. Like, right. He'll go get your checkbook for you and hand you the pen. He's like, here. It's just. Well, I know that if you are not able to donate, a few things you can do. You can share this on all of your Facebook pages. You can also set up an account through Amazon. I've done that, and it's called Smile, and you go through that, and then every single thing you buy through Amazon goes straight to Joey's legacy. And it may only feel like it's 50 cents here and 20 cents there, but I know there's people out there that are on Amazon all day long, every day. I know you are. I know who you are. So that money will add up. So just go to your Amazon account, go to a Smile, and then you put in Joey's legacy. That's one way you can do it. I know that the more we share this and the more we talk about it, we can make a difference. The Spaw is going to be doing a charity event coming up sometime. It'll be when it's warm, because we'll do a big thing. Hopefully, I'm trying to get Scott when he feels better to be able to come out. And there's some other things that we're thinking about doing as far as raising the money. But Scott, what else can we do? I know we did an auction. Maybe we could do another auction.
People, if they're willing to a Facebook fundraiser, for my birthday, I'd like to.
That's a good one.
And everybody's got a birthday. And there's lots of different things people can do if they don't have, any funds, any spare funds to donate. They can, if they're willing to. It's just a matter of how much passion you have for this.
Yeah.
I still find a lot of people, scratching their heads for malpractice. What do you mean veterinary malpractice? You mean medical? I said, well, no. Practice. It happens to cats and dogs and horses as well. It's not, no one's perfect. Veterinarians aren't perfect. None of us are perfect. That's why it happens to dogs and cats. So, you got to, part of this group, you've got to get passionate about what we do, because things are changing. We're starting to see changes. And I still stick to my 2000 prediction that you're going to see most of the 50 states with laws that enhance the perception and the value, if I can use that word. And it's just starting to happen. I see the cracks in the wall of the veterinary indoctrination machine. We'll put it that way, since we're on a live show. I'll be generous and I'll say it that way. But here's the bottom line, Carrie. Okay, what is the purpose of disciplinary action? To change behavior. If your son comes home and did something wrong, and you don't discipline them, how likely is it they're going to change their behavior on their own? Right. So, and it goes the same thing with the vet boards. If they're not going to discipline firmly and fairly, then
What's the
this
point?
small subset of small animal practitioners are going to continue to do. They know they can get away with whatever they get away with, and they're going to continue to do it. And we're not asking for anything major. We just want firm and fair discipline. And there's plenty of, especially I can speak, about the state of Florida, and I'm sure it's the same in all 50 states. There are state sentencing guidelines in place, have been there for years, for progressive discipline, second and subsequent offenders. In Florida, the second offense can get you a year suspension. Go back to 2003, minutes of all the quarterly meetings of the Florida Board of Veterinary Medicine. You can count on one hand how many times they issued a suspension, let alone a revocation.
Yeah.
So, they're there to do a job, which in my opinion, they don't do well. They don't do it all. And there's overwhelming, compelling evidence of that. It's not just my opinion. So until that changes, we just have to do the best we can to fight back.
I think, and I don't know if you guys would agree, Dr. Dodds, maybe you can enlighten us a little bit because we're past time a little bit, but I think a lot of people, and we talked about this before, a lot of people don't think this is ever going to happen to them or that it has happened to them. And I think a lot of people have been victim of malpractice and don't even know it. Would you agree, Dr. Dodds?
I think that's true, but I think I also agree with Scott. There are certain people that have been disciplined for some time and nothing really changes. I mean, we had a case in Arizona. Look at the veterinarian in Texas that shot the cat with the arrow.
I didn't know about that. What?
It was a horrible case. And she
Yeah.
lost her license, by the way. It was taken away.
I would hope so.
Yeah. She shot a cat with an arrow.
Why?
And because it was bothering her. And then she held a picture of the cat with the arrow through its body and posted that online. I mean, that was, it took a long time to get that actually resolved and get her license taken away, because there was a big argument amongst the veterinarians in Texas about whether that was enough to take the license away, because she was just shooting what she considered was a predator. I mean,
They had to argue about this.
right?
That's scary. That is the problem with the veterinary board, that was even a discussion.
Yep, it was a discussion.
Wow. Well, that says it right there. Right there is why we need to get this documentary made. How crazy is it that people discussed whether or not she should lose her license over killing a cat because it was bothering her?
Right.
That shows that she's not even mentally capable of being a veterinarian, let alone working. I don't know. Okay.
Well, the worst part was her showing a picture of the dead cat. That meant that there was no respect for that.
No respect.
None
No
whatsoever.
respect.
Which of course against the veterinary practice oath and everything we ever do and stand for.
That poor cat. Oh,
Yeah.
God, that makes me angry. Well, we've come to kind of the end where I'm just going to ask really quick to Dr. Dodds and Kristina. Dr. Dodds first, what can pet parents do? Give us 2 things to help keep them away from veterinary malpractice.
You have to take down notes of everything that happens. Like you said, you need to do wellness exams on a regular basis so you know that your animal is well or not well at the time. And so therefore you're protecting yourself, and make sure that you document everything that happens.
Perfect. Those are perfect. Get your wellness. I'll be calling you tomorrow, Dr. Dodds. And make sure you document everything. Kristina, what would make your job easier to make these things go through? Perfect timing, Kitty.
She's good at that. She's making sure I'm working. I guess in addition to what Dr. Dodds said, ask questions. Ask questions of your vet if you don't understand what they're talking about, if you don't understand what they're doing, ask them to explain everything. Make them slow down. Sometimes, especially with this COVID stuff, they're trying to just get through as many patients as they can. And I when I'm on the phone with my vet during COVID, like I make them very angry. I can tell, because by the end of they're like, anything else, Miss Bergsten? And I'm like, actually, as a matter of fact, yes, I have one more question.
Glad you asked.
Right. Yeah. Famous last words. But
We don't
Yeah.
spend enough time explaining anything in human medicine either. You're
Oh,
exactly
totally.
very important to help people understand.
It is. And then the
Yeah.
other thing is get a second opinion. If something sounds fishy or something's not sitting right, trust your intuition, trust your gut, and go get a second opinion. As long as it's not a life-threatening emergency and you have the opportunity to get a second opinion, definitely do it.
Awesome. That's really great advice. I'm going to go ahead and let us all go for the evening, but thank you so much, everybody. Scott, of course, thank you so much for
Thank you.
starting this organization. Dr. Dodds, Jerry, Kristina, thank you guys for being here with me. And for everybody who's listening, thank you so much for your continued support, whether it's financial or sharing this everywhere you can. If we get more followers, then, we can get this documentary made. So, all right. If you guys have any questions, you can always send them into Joey's Legacy as well. So have a good evening, everybody.
Bye,
Bye.
Jared.
Bye. Thanks for
Thanks,
having
every-
me.
Good night.
Thanks.
Bye.
Good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Good night.